Hey everyone! So, I think it's been a little over a week since I did my last video, and I was thinking about it. I'm like, oh, I guess it's time to do another installment of my story. Also notice I'm not wearing a head covering right now. The reason that I usually am wearing head coverings in my other videos, is because it's usually like right after my prayer time, and I just haven't taken it off yet. I was wearing it for every day, all the time for quite a while, but I no longer feel called to do it outside of prayer or mass. So those are the times that I am currently head covering still, and I intend to continue doing that. Also, of course, in adoration or confession too. Anytime that I would encounter the presence of Jesus, or I feel that I especially need just the grace to, whatever I'm going through. Like, sometimes I just feel like I'm called to cover my head. But today, it's a quiet day, and my children, well, my baby right now is sleeping. And my husband took the boys to his mom's house for the day, to their farm, so they can run around, have fun. So that's why it's so quiet. And to celebrate, I am in fact having a little early afternoon glass of wine, because this kind of quiet literally never happens when you have 4 children, ever. So celebrate. Plus, I'm going to be entering the last year of my 20s this next week, so I think I deserve that glass of wine. Just a little bit. Just kidding. But I hope you guys are having a relaxing Saturday with some peace and quiet. I'm probably going to do a ton of laundry since I'm super behind on it, and listen to birth podcasts, and hopefully dig a little deeper into some midwifery textbooks that I'm reading right now. I'm an introvert, absolutely. I know it may not seem like that because I'm, of course, on here talking about my life, but I don't really do well with, like, being out and about, and being around a lot of people just really exhausts me. Like, I'm great one-on-one with people, but no, as far as crowds, I kind of get a little off balance if I'm around people for too long. So I enjoy the quiet and the solitude of my home on weekends, especially with no children. So, not that I don't love my kids, but all you moms know we need that break to really just refresh ourselves and, like, look inside of ourselves and connect with God more on a deeper level. So yeah, I'm celebrating today, just a little bit. So, I think where I left off in my last video, talking about, just the trauma that occurred when I found out I was pregnant, all the things that happened in my family, and to be honest, that was a very short, condensed version of everything that happened. I literally could not even give you an account of all the things, all the dramatic events that happened. That part of my life in and of itself would take a book. So, and to be honest, it's in the past, and I've forgiven them for what they've done. I can't dwell on it, but it is a part of my story, and it is it's what's made me who I am today, and the choices that I make today are a lot of because of that. So, I can't forget it, but I'm definitely not really willing to go through every little bit of detail on that. So, moving on, I, was 16 when I found out I was pregnant. I believe that was in January I would have found out I was pregnant. And then my 17th birthday occurred, and shortly thereafter, I was placed with my grandparents with all of that stuff that was going on. The pregnancy itself was really hard. Not so much physically, I mean, it was hard physically because I think I was under so much stress, but the mental and emotional anxieties that I had of being a mom, an unmarried mom, like living with that taboo, because I had grown up in such a protected circle of people, where those things just didn't happen. Um, it was a pretty hard thing to face. Like, I was the black sheep. I was the one with the capital scarlet letter A, like, I think I actually wrote a song at one point about wearing the badge of the scarlet letter A. And I did everything in my power to try to accept it, but it was pretty hard to accept, and my mom and dad always had ways somehow of finding out what I was doing, where I was going. It seemed like everywhere I went, there was someone who was reporting to my parents, like, what I was doing. And that was really hard. Like, I felt like I had no privacy whatsoever. And living with my grandparents, although I am so eternally grateful for that, that was hard too, because I went from one home with a set of rules to the next home with a different, I mean, I wouldn't say there was necessarily, like, hard rules or anything. It was just a different environment that I hadn't grown up in, and different dynamics that I hadn't been around. I mean, you're around your grandparents, but, like, you don't live with them, so you don't really know. And because we lived so close to them, we were literally, like, right down the street from them, we never really stayed overnight or did anything like that, so I never got to really know them until I started living with them. And not that it was bad or anything, it was just different. So I was learning to balance different expectations, different dynamics, and my grandparents really did respect me. They really did not treat me like a child. At that point, they really respected me to make my decisions as an adult, because they knew I was going to be acting as one, making decisions for my child anyway. So they didn't treat me like a child, which was very refreshing. Like, unlike my parents, like, they let me make my choices. So that was good. But the physical aspect of the pregnancy itself, it was really hard. Like, I didn't gain very much weight at all. I remember them being very, very pushy on, protein supplements and me trying to gain weight and whatnot. I mean, I was a stick when I got pregnant with him. I was like 98 pounds. Like, I was tiny. And they wanted to see me gain like 30 pounds at least over the course of the pregnancy. So I ended up only gaining 21 pounds, though, which was good considering the fact that he was actually born premature. And this is the part, like, well, wait, I don't want to get into that yet. The emotional part of the pregnancy was just, it was so hard because I wanted so much to have that family bond with my boyfriend, who's now my husband, if you didn't already know that. I craved that, the marriage covenant, but we weren't there yet. Like, I wanted to have all those things. I remember laying in bed by myself and just, like, wanting to be near him. Wanting him to be able to comfort me when I didn't feel good. Or, that emotional, I lacked the emotional stability that a marriage would produce. And I desired it so strongly because I had lost everything. I lost all my friends, all my family, except for I had like one friend who I'm still friends with today. Hi, Hannah. Who stuck with me through this. And even then, it was kind of a strain on our relationship because she too, was a strong Christian believer, and it's just a hard situation, and I don't blame her in any way, shape, or form, because she did show me the most mercy out of all the people I had ever known. And so did her family. Like, I actually reconnected with them a year ago because of her wedding, and just, like, the mercy that her mother showed to me was really moving. Even, like, 11, 12 years later, And it almost brings me to tears, like, Raylene, I love you. But, so, I just, I'm amazed by, that family and that friend of mine who had so much mercy for me, even though my parents and everyone who was involved in that church really tore me down and told everyone that, basically I was a whore and a horrible person. Um, so yeah, I really lacked that stability. And, your grandparents just, they live in a different time, a different generation. They're doing their best to understand you, but they don't always. There were different things that I knew that I would do differently because, new research comes out. Like, I am pretty hippy-dippy. I wasn't at the time, though. I grew up very, very traditional, like, American mindset, like, food pyramid, get your vaccines, circumcise your kids type, all of the above. And, spoiler alert, I don't believe in any of that now at all. It's all bullcrap. So, moving on. So after, there were things that I knew, and breastfeeding was a really hard thing. My grandma really, like, wanted me to, she was really supportive, but, like, she didn't understand why I was really, like, anti-baby food until 6 months, or why I didn't want to put cereal in his, give him a bottle and put cereal in it so he'll sleep at night type things, which I never did because I just instinctively knew that co-sleeping and breastfeeding were probably the healthiest things for my baby. So I decided on that way before I even had him. So, but the pregnancy itself was pretty hard physically. I think it was mostly because of the emotional aspect of everything. I just remember sleeping for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Like, I could not get enough sleep in that pregnancy. And possibly because I had chronic Lyme disease. I had been battling that since I was 12, 13-ish. Like, I was 12 when I originally got it, but it was, like, almost 13 before they caught it. So, took them a while to figure it out, and because of that, it became a lifelong problem, which I still deal with flare-ups from time to time. So, there's not a lot of studies done on pregnancy and Lyme disease, and I was still having active symptoms at that time, rashes, headaches, joint pain. So there was a lot of that on top of all the emotional and psychological trauma that was going on in this pregnancy. I remember the worst physical thing that would have been, like, normal in pregnancy, because I've had it the rest of my pregnancies. So the worst symptom I ended up having was heartburn. And I've had it, like I said, in all of my pregnancies. Actually, this last pregnancy with my first little girl was probably the least amount of heartburn that I'd had. So I don't know if, it was still bad, but I don't know if there's a difference between boy and girls in the acid content. I don't know, but I definitely significantly had less with my little girl, than I did with all my boys. My boys, I just was, like, on the edge of puking all the time, especially from, like, that last trimester. So, moving on. Yeah, it was a really hard pregnancy. Just very disconnected from everything. But I went in for my 34-week checkup, and I was going to an OB at the time because I didn't know any better, to be completely honest. My mom set me up with the OB that she had gone to for years. Like, she didn't deliver me, but she delivered, in quotations, because I hate that word. You don't deliver babies, you deliver pizzas. Babies are birthed, pizzas are delivered. Okay, moving on. So, she had delivered my other 3 siblings. I was actually born in Florida, so before we moved back up here to Ohio. So, I just, my mom loved her, and my mom was an OB nurse and had worked with her for years, and so I was just like, okay, like, this is what's set up for me, so I'm just going to go with it. Which was actually really difficult and hard because, there was definitely HIPAA violations going on between them because my mom just kept, like, calling her and calling her and calling her and trying to get information about me. And she gave it to her because they were, like, coworker friend buddies, you know? Like, I mean, so many HIPAA violations I could have sued for, but, so I went to my 34-week checkup. I had been having some, like, Braxton Hicks contractions, but nothing that, like, I felt was indicative of labor possibly coming. So I went to my 34-week checkup, and she checked my cervix, which I'm not sure why you would do that 34 weeks, but, I mean, you're just going to introduce infection, possibility of infection. There's no reason to check at 34 weeks. Moving on again. So she checked me, and I was 4 centimeters, and she was like, what is going on? Have you been having contractions? And I was like, well, I mean, like, nothing really that painful, so I don't know. And I was kind of shocked, and so she was like, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a non-stress test. So they did that, and everything was fine, you know, no problems. He was moving great. He was actually my most crazy baby of all of them, just, like, kicks it all the time. Oh my gosh, that kid was a ninja. You could watch my stomach flip from across the room. Anyway, so that wasn't a problem. His heart rate was good. They did an ultrasound and found that his water was low. Now, she said that she would like to see it at a 10. And I was like, okay, you know, I don't know what that means. I'm 17. I have no idea what that means. So, and mine was a 7. And she's like, well, you know, I would like to see this at a 10, but it's a 7, and that's kind of low, and I'm not comfortable with it, so why don't we go ahead and induce you? We'll give you steroid shots, and then we'll induce you. So I'm sitting there, and I'm like, what is going on? You know, like, my gut feeling was like, no, don't do it. No, don't do it. This isn't what you want. This isn't what you want. You want to carry this baby. There's nothing wrong with your baby. My gut intuition told me, don't do it. But I'm 17. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know anything. And my grandma's sitting there, and she goes, you should do what the doctor tells you to do because you don't know. And, you know, that very, like, old school mentality, don't question, this is the recommendation, do it. Now I know that 7 is actually not critically low. Like, for an induction, it should be like a 5. Or, you know, so, and also on top of that, it was an incredibly hot summer. I wasn't living with air conditioning. It was like 100 degrees out. And I know I was not drinking enough water. What they should have done is put an IV in and see if they could get my fluid levels up. Or just sent me home and told me to drink water and check my fluid levels again. So I am pretty sure that the low fluid that they were so concerned about was most likely dehydration from living in 90 to 100 degree circumstances with no air conditioning and not drinking enough water. But they didn't even consider that. So I took the steroid injections, and that was a 2-day thing, and then they sent me home for a few days, and I came back. I wasn't quite 35 weeks yet. It was literally only like 3 or 4 days between, you know, the first hospital stay and getting steroids to the second hospital stay and induction. And so I went in for another check. I hadn't progressed any further. I was still 4. But, and they didn't even check my fluid levels. But she just was kind of like, you know, I think it would be better better out than in because we don't know what's really going on. So, and my grandma, again, was sitting there, and my husband, who has no idea, well, husband now, he was a, 21-year-old kid and was like, I don't know, like, what do you want to do? My grandma's really pushing to follow the doctor's orders. So I'm sitting there crying because I'm like, I don't want to do this. Like, nothing in me wants to do this. And, but I followed it. And, so what ended up happening, they sent me home, I packed my bag and went back at, I think, 4 o'clock that day was when they started the induction. And I remember them being like, you can't eat any food, just clear liquids. And I remember being like, screw that, I'm about to go through labor, and I'm hungry, and I need energy. So I ate, like, chicken noodle soup and peaches and ice cream, and I was like, I'm doing what I want, because I'm already being forced to do what I don't want to do. So there again, I had the intuition that the whole, like, not eating thing is BS. You need energy to go through labor. So I went in, and they administered the Pitocin. I think, like, it took them a couple hours to get around to doing it. Like, it was, like, 5:36 before they actually started the Pitocin. And it wasn't really, like, doing much for me. Like, I was like, okay, like, we're starting to have contractions, but they're not crazy. Then around 7 o'clock, she came in, and she was like, well, we're going to give you a little help. So she broke my water, and at that point, you know, they really started, like, they were monitoring all the time anyway, but then my contractions really started to pick up, and they really had me monitored like crazy. And it's really hard to move around and do things. I remember sitting on the birth ball for quite some time during that labor, just rocking back and forth. And my fiance, or boyfriend at the time, was super supportive. He was perfect. Like, I could tell he was scared, so scared, but he was also, like, very present, and great. And so we just kind of, like, hung around for a while. His mom showed up. I remember her, like, sneaking pieces of pineapple to me because she knew they wouldn't let me eat, and I was so hungry and so, like, tired after a couple hours of those really heavy contractions. And then finally around, like, 10:45 probably that evening, I was like, I gotta go to the bathroom, you know, like, I've got to go to the bathroom right now. And so I go to the toilet, and my mother-in-law, she's like, does it feel like you need to poop? And I was like, yes, like, really badly. And she's like, okay, honey, like, you don't actually need to go to the bathroom. We're having this baby. And getting to know, I'm a first-time mom. I have no idea what that sensation feels like. All I knew is I was, like, really intense contractions, and I knew it was normal for people to, like, go to the bathroom during labor. So I thought that was what was going on. I just remember having a hard time getting there and a hard time getting back on the bed. And getting on the bed was, like, the most painful part. And so from then on, they were like, okay, you can't move. You're, like, complete. You have to stay in this bed. And it shocked everyone because everyone was betting as a first-time mom, I would be a, quote, tomorrow baby. They were taking bets on it would be today or tomorrow. And everyone was like, it's going to be tomorrow. It's going to be tomorrow. Well, the nurse realizes that I'm complete, and she totally freaks out because doctor had not been even called into the room. Like, she had went home, and she was, like, on call. They had not called her at all. So she realizes I'm complete, and she starts freaking out, telling me not to push, not to push, not to push. She had me, like, breathing in and out, trying to not push for probably, like, 15 minutes. Like, the doctor flew in. I don't know exactly where she lives in relation to the hospital, but she was there within 15 minutes. And she's, like, putting her gloves on. You know, she comes in, it's, like, crazy. Everyone's getting, like, all the NICU stuff set up, and it was just, like, mass chaos. And she comes up, and she's got her full gloves on. Like, I'm ready to push this baby out. Like, I've been breathing for a good 15 minutes, like, resisting the urge to push. And finally I was like, I can't do it anymore. So I just start like letting go, because I mean, it was literally a fetal ejection reflex that I was experiencing. You know, like I could not hold back any longer. But I wasn't necessarily pushing with the intent to push. And so that she comes in, and the head, as normal with the first time mom. First of all, I was on my back, which is a terrible position to be in because it's so painful, and it's not good for baby. It cuts off oxygen. You should never be on your back pushing if you can avoid it at all costs. I had no epidural. There was no reason that I need to be in that position, but because of my programming and everything you see on TV, I assumed that was the only position to be in. So anyway. So I was not pushing, but baby's head was moving in and out like it should, slowly stretching me. And she waited for a couple minutes, and she was just like, okay, well, it's time for your episiotomy. And I was like, what? Because I had told her in office visits that I did not want that done. And I told her earlier that day, that the one thing I did not want done was an episiotomy. So she was very well aware of how I felt about it. And so I was shocked that she was like, it's time for your episiotomy. And I looked at her, I was clear as day, like, no. I told you no. I told you no in my visits. I told you no earlier today. I made it very clear that I did not want one. And she had the little scissors in her hand, and she was like, but if you don't, you're going to tear. And without waiting for my consent, which I was determined not to consent to, she snipped me. And I remember being so angry, and to this day, it is the most angering thing about my story, because that is not okay. That is medical rape. Cutting someone's vagina without their permission, like, it is medical rape. There is no way around it. And just the disrespect that was given to me and my body from another woman, it just angers me so much, because she should know, as a woman who had children, how degrading that is, to have something done to your vagina without your permission for no reason, because I had not even tried to push at that point. And of course, he flew right out. There was mass chaos. Everyone's rubbing him down. And I didn't even get to see him for a few minutes. Everything was like kind of blurry at that point. The nurse is like doing the abdominal massage, which felt worse than any of those Pitocin contractions, which is, it should not be done. I'm sorry. If you're being hooked up to Pitocin, there's no reason for abdominal massage. No, uterine massage, forget it. Like, you've already got the Pitocin. Even without the Pitocin, you don't really, I mean, in extreme circumstances, maybe, but as a general rule, no. So, I remember wanting to punch that nurse, and she looked at me, and she's like, this is my job. And I was like, get off of me. But, of course, I didn't know better, so I let her do her job. And finally, they handed me my baby for about a minute, just long enough for me to see his face and to, just see him. Like, I had not seen my baby, and they let Billy hold him for a second, and then we got a quick picture of us together, and then they rushed him off to the NICU, where we did not get to see him for the next, 3 or 4 hours. And they had him on all the oxygen, they had him on the tubes, everything, and I had not breastfed at that point. And I remember going into the NICU and looking at this little baby under heat lamps and everything, and thinking, like I felt no connection to him whatsoever. I had no connection. I remember, like, that's not even my baby. Like, I was like, that's what it's like having a baby. I felt no joy. None. Just fear of how could I possibly mother a child that I didn't feel any love towards whatsoever at that point, just trauma. And I didn't know why, you know, I didn't know why I felt that way. I do now, but I didn't know why I felt that way. You know, all that precious bonding time was gone, and I lost that. I lost it through Pitocin, not producing my own oxytocin. I lost it through not being able to breastfeed, not being able to be skin to skin, and the psychological and emotional trauma of the whole experience surrounding it. So I remember being in that wheelchair looking at that little baby through glass and thinking, like, how is this my child? I don't know what to do. I felt broken. I'd just been completely abused against my will. And, yeah, it was one of the lowest points in my life, looking at my firstborn child. It should have been one of the happiest, and it wasn't. So, yeah, we were scared shitless, to be completely honest, to be parents to a 4-pound, 10-ounce baby boy, whom we named Frederick, after our favorite composer, Frederick Chopin, and because we were both pianists. So we didn't get to see or hold him. Well, we didn't get to hold him for 3 days, and I wasn't allowed to breastfeed him for the first week of his life. I was pumping milk. I had more than anyone could possibly use, and yeah, I didn't get to hold him for 3 days, and then I didn't get to breastfeed him till he was a week old. And yeah, that was my birth and the immediate postpartum. We took him home at 10 days old when he finally reached 5 pounds, and I remember being terrified going home. So I'm going to kind of leave it on a low note this time. I'm going to let it just sink in. Let you guys feel the emotion that I felt that day. I want that to be in you, because I want you to know this is so common for women with their first pregnancies who are abused, traumatized, don't have a proper support system. This is the feeling that they're left with. So we really need to be conscious of how we treat pregnant women, especially single moms, and be that support for them. Okay, so I will go into my postpartum in the next video, and yeah, until then, have a great time, and I will share more of my story as to how I evolved through my postpartum. All right, see you guys.